Hi guys, today we will introduce you guys to British famous painter Lucian Freud. First of all, we would like to introduce some of his artwork that you guys may guess what is the characteristic of his work. So from this picture that you see, you will see that most of his work are portraits and most of them are painted naked. He was born from an artistic Jewish family that his dad is architect and his mom studied art history. The name Lucian is from his mom in the memory of an ancient writer of Lucian of Samosata. He also has famous psychoanalyst who is his grandfather Sigmund Freud. He has the kind of characteristic which is private, so most of his portrait will be the one who is close to him, for example, his friends or his family.
For theme and style, in his early work it is about surrealism and then become realism and expressionism. Freud also emphasized on nakedness and portraiture. He fascinated with flesh and nakedness. He liked to focus on the physical thing more than the psychological. He is different from the other artists because he created his self-portraiture throughout the entire of his career. He painted his self-portrait since he was about 16 and the last one when he was about 82. Somebody saw Freud painting as a sculpture because you can see the texture and detail of flesh on his artwork. According to Freud's assistant David Dawson, Freud wanted to try the sitter to feel very self-unconscious, to totally be yourself in the way that Freud is disappear. Dawson in the point that individuality is very important, no matter the gender you are. That made somebody criticize him as a feminist. Lucian Freud got influence from Rembrandt by painting self-portrait with different expression. For Francis Bacon, Freud had changed his style after he met Francis. In the period of knowing Francis Bacon, Freud changed his style and his brush. Francis' idea to load every emotion and energy in one brush mark very fascinated Lucian, and that is when Lucian changed his brushes. Lucian wanted to load psychology into every brush mark that he put down, so it could say that Francis is the one who taught Lucian Freud to become more contemporary. Freud is the artist who didn't want to paint in the hill landscape, but he liked to paint in his studio, where could consider as his own work.
To emphasize more on the close relationship of Lucian Freud and Francis Bacon, on the left side, it is the portrait of Francis Bacon that was painted by Lucian Freud. And on the right side, it is the portrait of Lucian Freud that is painted by Francis Bacon. I will first start with his early work of landscape with painting. Then it gives a sense of surrealism. In this painting, we will see that there is nothing balanced, the trees and the flowers. The tree which is like dry and almost dying, and the flower with a velvet color. Then it gives a sense of the lively flowers. The boy on the right hand side is standing on a cloud, which doesn't seem to be real. And the boy which is sitting on the boat, but the boat is like inflated. That doesn't seem to be possible.
Startlement. It is the portrait of Freud himself, that it was just like a normal graphic drawing and almost nothing there. It seems very powerful with a slightly mouth open, that it persuades us to look at it. It also reminds us of the series of etchings that Rembrandt made in 1540s. By this time, his style changed to more dense and expressive with the use of horsehair brush. Girl with a Kitten in 1947. So, as mentioned that he always paints the portrait of his friends and family. He is the first wife of him, Kitty Garment, who is the daughter of famous sculptor Jacob Estienne, year before their marriage. This is considered a double portrait of Cat and Kitty Garment. It was painted in earth tone background, which is contrast to mahogany hair color of her. For me, I think that it is double portrait, but I think that for himself, Cat was just another composition that make his wife more outstanding. Moreover, even the neck of the cat has been squeezed, but his face doesn't seem to hurt at all. Girl with a White Dog. It is the typical work of Freud in early period with the use of sable brush that is used to apply and have a linear precision that create the painting more like drawing. The robe that is stripped off the sitter's shoulder that expose her right beads with a milk color and faint contour that give composition and overall flatness.
Reflection with Two Children 1965. This piece is Lucian Freud's self-portrait with his two children, Lars and Henri Boyd. It is painted by looking down at his reflection in a mirror placed by his feet. This painting shows the artist at a huge father figure, while his children are depicted as very tiny. The artist made the use of mirror expressive, and he stared at it coldly. He stated that he used a palette knife to describe the space around him and smeared it to create the painting. Interior with Plant, Reflection Listening, 1968. Lucian Freud later put himself in his artwork, so this one you can see his self-portrait behind the plant. Freud has a tiny head and shoulders, his hand covered to ear, confront a jungle of leaves spreading across the surface. This probably implies to the impression of an explorer seeking his own path. Large Interior, W11 1981–1983, painting of his two lovers and three children. His daughter Bella claimed that the position of the sisters are very uncomfortable. Freud began painting this on a larger scale than he had worked on before, partly because he was having trouble with his shoulders, and he feared that he would soon become incapable of working on such a scale. Freud wanted one of his granddaughters to pose for the smaller figure in the foreground, though in the end he had to do with a substitute. He described this finished result as a slight bit of raw paint. Its composition derived from a small painting by the early 18th century French artist Jean-Antoine Watteau called Pure Content, a period teased by a group of thirsting women. Freud's painting is focuses around Susie Boyd's son, Kai, a boy in yellow, who takes the place of Pierrot. Around him are the women in Freud's life, his daughter Bella playing the mandarin, Kai's mother to the right holding a fan, and two Irishmen in W11 1985. As you can see in classical portrait, the subject always makes eye contact with you to create the sensation that they are posing for you in an unnatural setting. But in Freud's portrait, they rarely make eye contact, either looking away or seeming to look beyond you. You can see that the figure of Irish father does not make eye contact with the viewer. Freud also depicted himself in an extraordinary way by putting himself in the painting behind the two sisters. It is a kind of making evidence of the intense relationship between the painter and the sisters in his studio by positioning himself in the margin of the painting. It could say that Freud turned ordinary things to become something memorable. Naked Portrait on a Red Sofa 1989–1991. It is an intimate and poignant portrait of the artist's most personal subjects, his daughter Bella. It is the final 1980s portrait of Bella painted when she was in her 20s. The portrait is carved out from a layer of paint, and see Bella stages across the red sofa. That's what the setting for so many of Freud portraits. It is one of the finest examples for their growing relationship as seen in painting, which resulted in 11 works across his career. It is one of the finest examples of the growing relationship as seen in the painting, which resulted in 11 works across his career. Naked Portrait on a Red Sofa can be seen as the culmination of the relationship that began with the painting called Pregnant Girl in 1960–1961, when her mother was pregnant, while many of the portraits of the 1980s show Bella clothed either as a part of a group or closer composition of her face and hands. The freedom and confidence felt in the naked portrait on a red sofa that marked it as one of the most honest and personal images of.
Her working Reflection 1992 to 1993 is considered by many art critics to be one of Freud's masterpieces and definitely one of his best self-portraits that he ever done. He did this piece when he was 70 years old, and even though he didn't talk so much about his influences or discuss much about his private life, he said that, "I felt really uneasy doing it. Seldom got so fed up with a model, but I thought after putting so many other people through it, I ought to subject myself to the same treatment." What's interesting about this piece is that for many artists throughout the history, self-portraits can be deep and meaningful, like a reflection of the artist's life or how they see themselves as a person and so on. But Freud didn't really seem to think like that. As mentioned by Martin Gayford, one of his friends and an art critic, he said that Lucian wasn't really interested in his own psychology, and he was not very introspective as well. He was, however, interested in other people extremely. And so this piece, even though it seems really nice, it's just another experiment where he tried new techniques in mediums, and it didn't really have any deep meaning behind it. It came from the constant need to change and evolve and not repeating himself. Like many of Freud's work, it doesn't really have any deep meaning to it. Now we're going to talk about two of Freud's most famous paintings, which are from the series of his nude paintings of Sue Tilly, or Big Sue as Freud liked to call her. She was an obese woman whose weight was around 126 kilograms at the time. She was a friend of a friend, and he decided to paint her probably because he was interested in how the flesh of fat people worked. He said that it's flesh without muscle, and it has developed a different kind of texture through bearing such a weight-bearing thing. And so the first picture that we are going to talk about, Benefit's Supervisor Sleeping, 1995. This painting held the world record for the highest price paid for a painting by a living artist in 2008. It was sold at $33.6 million US. Actually, not a very conventional choice to paint a fat person, at least not in this way that Freud painted her. And as you can see here, it is a very good example when you think about how Freud painted people, how he liked to use paints after paints, layers after layers, creating such a thick layers of paints. Some critics even said that it is almost like the paints are almost like muds that he, keeps layering it, because he's actually very serious about paintings, and so he wanted the right colors and the right way to do it. That's why it took him months to actually finish one painting. And not only that, you can see the ambiguity in the picture. We don't really understand what happened in the picture. It looked strange. Looked as if she might be sleeping. Yeah, she's sleeping, but what happened to her? It doesn't look like a normal way to sleep for normal people. Is she sick? Is she poisoned, maybe? And it's just in a sense that it looks very realistic, to the point that it doesn't really look realistic. It looks beyond being realistic. You can see how he is honest about how her body really is, how he was just so detailed about how he painted her. And that is similar with Benefit Supervisor Resting in 1995. This one was sold 4 years after his death, and so it was sold at even higher price, at $56.2 million US in 2015. The ambiguity is also there. What happened to her? Is she alright? Is she poisoned? What really happened here? And probably some people would say that this is unsightly. For many of Freud's painting, looks ugly. A lot of people would just outright say that they are ugly. But I think it is special in a way that you can't really take your eyes off from the painting. At first, you may be, yeah, it is ugly, but at the same time, there is some quality that you can't deny. And personally, I wouldn't have this in my house even if I had the money, but you can't deny how great yet unsightly his paintings are. After Cézanne, 1999 to 2000 is a unique work of Freud in the sense that it is one of the few that is theatrical and actually has some kind of narrative to it. Because what usually happened is that Freud didn't tell his models or subjects to pose in any certain way because he wanted to paint the subject in the way that they usually are, in their natural way of being. And so he said that it would be wrong to impose what he wanted the subject to be. But this painting after Cézanne is completely different because it is a variation or a paraphrase on a theme of Cézanne's Afternoon in Naples, painted in 1875. Afternoon in Naples is a series of paintings that Freud managed to own one of them. But you can see that the two paintings are very different in the sense that not only the scale, but also how Freud shifted the emphasis and figures in the painting. And so at the center, we can see the couple on the floor, and the woman seemed to be concerned about the man, and the man seemed to be stressed. There is a notable tension between the two people that we don't know what happened or what's happening. That is, if you compare it to Cézanne's painting, you can see that there is nothing complicated to understand. It is not a complex painting. There is a couple lying on the bed, and there is a servant, a maid, giving them some kind of refreshment, and that's it. That's a painting, but not in Freud's work. More importantly, the background and the maid is not just secondary to the couples anymore, because they added to the ambiguity of the painting. You would want to know what happened. Why are the couple in such a dirty room, which is actually Freud's studio apartment? And why is the maid there? Why is she naked? What is she interrupting them? What's happening between the two, the three of them? It's just a completely different kind of feeling from Cézanne's painting. And you might notice that the canvas is a bit strange. That is because Freud usually added a section of canvas to his painting if he felt like it is necessary for a painting to complete as a whole. And so that's why he added that section where the maid is. And this is his take, where he tried to explore the theme of dependence, independence, sexual engagement, alienation, and loneliness. The usual ambiguities there. We just can't help but wonder what's really happening in the picture. We painted a lot of portraits for rich and powerful people. That is probably because he was born wealthy as well. So it is no surprise that he would be in that kind of circle. But one of the most powerful person that he had ever painted, no doubt, would be the Queen Elizabeth II herself. This painting was done in 2001. It is actually one of his smallest work that he had ever done, which is only 9.5 by 6 inches. But it also took a lot of time until he finished it, just like any other paintings that he had done. What is different is that he had to travel to St. James Palace in order to paint the Queen, unlike most paintings that he painted in his own studio. Even that, the Queen didn't have enough time for him to actually finish the painting, so he had to use a model to be a stand-in for the Queen. After he finished it, many people criticized him for making the Queen ugly, or just outright accusing him of arranging this kind of light that make the Queen unflattering. But some people actually praise him for doing so, for doing what he did, because it signifies that he wouldn't compromise his style, his raw intensity, no matter who the subject is. Even the Queen, he wouldn't be less of himself for the Queen or for anyone. Some would say that it is probably his alter ego, because a lot of people said that it doesn't look like the Queen at all. So that is for yourself to judge, I suppose. A lot of people also said that he was a sold out because at that time he was old, and so maybe he needed the kind of publicity to keep himself alive again. This is the brigadier. A brigadier is basically a rank in an army, like colonel, basically that. This person right here in the painting is Andrew Parker Bowles. And if you are familiar with the name, it is because he used to be the husband of Camilla Parker Bowles, who is now married to Prince Charles and become the Duchess of Cornwall. Now the two, Parker Bowles and Freud, met because of their love for horses. Sometimes he would even lend horses to Freud for him to ride just for fun. By now, I think you remember that Freud had a lot of rich and powerful friends, partly because he's from a rich family himself, but that's not the significance of the painting because he even painted the queen. This person is nothing. But the brigadier is important in the sense that it is the painting of contrast between light and dark, between the old world order and the new. And I also think it is somewhere between like the middle ground of the two, because portraits of rich people are something that we really used to, something that happened for centuries, but how the brigadier was painted was different in the sense that it is very contemporary, how the brush strokes are used, the painting, the kind of color and the way that he was painted, it is very different from your traditional, typical portraits. And so I think this is a good example of how contemporary Freud can be. This won't be something that is acceptable for a portrait of a rich person in the past. On to the last painting of Freud that we are going to talk about today. But this is not the only last painting in our presentation in that sense, but also Freud's real final work before he died a few weeks afterwards. And this is the portrait of the hound. It is a painting of his longtime assistant and a close friend for 20 years, David Dawson, with his pet Eli. He said that he knew Dawson better than anyone else. He's been his most consistent model. They share a mutual understanding and respect for one another and a love of painting. And so about the painting itself, it is not finished. And as you can see at the body of the dog, you can see that he didn't even apply the paint on the dog yet, at least like half of the dog. And the color that he used is Clemnitz white, which is a type of white lead paint that Freud liked to use all the time. The accumulation of the paint on the canvas and the way in which the rendering takes shape, only if viewed from a certain distance, reflects how Freud had such a big admiration for the later works of masters such as Rembrandt, Titian and Velasquez. And that's our presentation. Thank you.